tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Through investigation, the Buddha came to see that the beginning point of tension happens at the craving link of tanha, and the craving gets bigger with the arising of clinging link, upadana. We can say how it happens. With the 6 sense doors in working condition, contact arises. With contact as condition, feeling arises. With feelings as condition, craving arises. With craving as condition, clinging arises. Clinging is the same thing as thinking and examining thoughts and mental proliferation. It is all of the thoughts, concepts, ideas, opinions, or imagination that run in our mind. Now, within these links, what happens next is a personal, habitual, usually emotional reaction that arises. Without understanding this process, we reach into our mind to figure out what to do when faced with some forms of sudden dissatisfaction, and we hang our head down, dropping from the weight of what we believe is happening to us, and we feel glum as life suddenly gets heavier. For our purpose here, let me refer to this next link as the habitual emotional tendency link, or bhava in Pali language. Because this seems closer to the idea of what this link is actually about at this point in this process. With habitual emotional tendency as condition, birth of reaction occurs. This is where we consciously choose to react. In the past, this link called bhava in Pali has an interesting history. You get the idea that many people over time were trying to explain it to be comprehended correctly. The bhava has been translated as existence. Later on, word being was used, and then the word becoming was used. But these English words, existence, being, becoming, and their definitions usually didn't contribute to understanding what was really going on at this point in the process. It was ignorant of this process. We may never realize how it happens, and we will always find ourselves unconsciously giving birth to mental, verbal, or physical reactions through the same non-thinking and exhaustive patterned behavior. There is no chance to respond because our habitual emotional tendencies take over too quickly and we don't know what's happening. We may struggle and suffer with tension that comes up, which then blossoms into all of our sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, despair, just like the Buddha describes in the text. Majjhima Nikaya Dhatu Vibhanga Sutta describes suffering blow by blow for us. In one place, the Buddha describes what we go through when we suffer. One sorrows, grieves, and laments, weeps, beating one's breast, and becomes distraught. An untrained mind has great difficulty seeing what is really going on in life situations. They don't see what is essentially here. Instead, we seem to live in a dream state and continue to wonder what is happening to us. We are caught in a fog as we get involved with many expanding and essential aspects of ongoing events. We continually suffer from what seems just like the past, or we worry a lot about unreasonably projected outcomes for a future that isn't here yet. We give up our present time and lament our past emotions. In this state, we are not truly alive in our present time. Life gets very heavy very quickly, bringing past emotional experiences into the present, and worrying about the future makes no sense. Without clearly understanding how things work, life can feel like we are forever caught in an unexplainable predicament. While the Buddha was investigating in a day out, he tried to look at all aspects of how suffering works and how to experience the cessation of suffering, what supported suffering and what did not. This was his question. In order to change our habitual tendency of holding on to things, he realized that he needed to examine what the supports were for this tendency of attachment to exist. He questioned whether how we live had anything to do with arising hindrances and whether our choices make the suffering worse. Could the way we are living be feeding the hindrances and obstacles that happen in life? Could our perspective about these obstacles make them stronger and stay with us longer? If we change the way we look at things and how we believe and how we behave, would this change our level of suffering? These were some of the questions he addressed. He discovered there is disharmony in the unwholesome thoughts and harmony in keeping wholesome thoughts around. He boiled this discovery down to 5 pieces of advice that can be followed very closely, that would discourage arising hindrances from coming up in our life. And he decided this would result in a smooth, harmonious life. In Majjhima Nikaya, Devdhavitaka Sutta, 2 kinds of feelings. The sutta is a picture of the Buddha investigation, the best way to live life. He tests wholesome and unwholesome states of living and demonstrates a foundation for the purpose of the precepts. Buddha's advice later became known as the 5 precepts. He advised people not to kill any living beings on purpose, not to steal, not to commit wrong sexual activity that cause mental or physical pain to anyone, not to lie, gossip, slander, or use harsh language, and not to use entertaining drugs or alcohol that would cloud mind's judgment about what to do next. Not breaking these pieces of advice would immediately change the level of lust and greed and hatred and aversion that could preoccupy our mind. There would be less dullness in mind that would arise, and a great reduction in restlessness, guilt, and remorse. Once we experience how the precepts affect the hindrances, then any doubt we have about the practice or life would fade away. To be precise, these pieces of advice were not commandments, but did, in fact, contain the same contents as many other religions have similar moral guidelines for better balance in life. The precepts as advice can easily be compared with the 5 fluids in automobiles: gas, oil, steering fluid, brake fluid, and transmission fluid that makes the engine run well. These 5 pieces of advice make the model called human being run well. The value of this kind of advice became obvious to the Buddha. If you live by not following these guidelines, then tension and tightness grows in mind. But by keeping them, tension is lower and mind calms down so that observation can take place while in your meditation. The Buddha realized that if people broke a precept, discordant tension arose in life, and the consequence was an obstacle arising in your meditation. When he began his meditation, lust and greed, hatred and delusion, dullness of mind, restlessness, guilt and remorse, or doubt came to visit him often. These hindrances are reflecting our life decisions, movements. They are causing the suffering in life too. They are not just obstructions for meditation progress. They can come up in life as well. If the precepts are kept and these disturbances are not fed our personal attention, they will eventually fade away. Personal attention is their nutriment. With less going on in mind, the Buddha was able to refine his observation skills and actually see how mind's attention impersonally moves moment to moment from one object to another. He could watch how any arising phenomena comes up and passes away. how this observation works in mind, Majjhima Nikaya in the Tripitaka, Anupada Sutta, where we hear a report of how Sariputta, a disciple of the Buddha, did his meditation and how he was aware of what was happening one by one as they occurred during his meditation sessions. In this way, the Buddha investigated the interrelationship between the Four Noble Truths, the impersonal process of dependent origination, and the three characteristics of existence. If a hindrance arose, he decided not to give it mind's personal attention, which appeared to be the mental nutriment it wanted. Instead, he abandoned it by taking mind's attention away from it, perhaps smiling. And this relaxed mind and body then returned to his meditation object. He could then observe more deeply and realize the actuality. In the Majjhima Nikaya Sutta again, in the Upakkilesa Sutta, during the Buddha's own practice, he tells Anuruddha, another disciple, that the solution for any hindrances is their abandonment. After tranquilizing his mind and body, he gently brought mind's attention back to his object of meditation with a slight smile and resumed practicing with the breath, or more often he would practice giving a gentle wish for loving kindness where it was needed. Or spend time each morning sending compassion to other beings while sitting in the base of infinite space. He became less interested in what was arising as mind's awareness got sharper. Each time this occurred, he noticed how whatever arises passes away, anicca, impermanence. How if he took it personally, which caused his suffering, dukkha, and how if related his personal attention off the obstacle and impersonally left it alone, it always seemed to fade away and not come up anymore. Meanwhile, mind was becoming purified and retrained. Each time he did this, mind was getting a message, and he noticed how mind was releasing any tension earlier in this process. The result was that this awareness became sharper each time, and his observation became more refined as he continued to fall into the deeper states of his meditation. When a lot of hindrances are arising through sensory contacts, it may feel like that they are moving too fast to observe this process clearly. What can you do about this? At this point, because we have established more understanding of anicca, we may let many thoughts simply live out their lives, arising, existing, and passing away without attention. We now understand it is not our personal job to stop mind thinking. This is too forceful and not necessary. as we let any distraction be, now we only practice the release, relax, come back when we recognize a thought feels like it is trying to pull our attention away from our object of meditation. The Buddha discovered that it is not necessary to pay attention to all arising phenomena. Once you understand how the law of anicca, impermanence, occurs, it is good that you remember the Dharma as taught by me. Thus, I have stated how obstructive things become obstruction and how they are able to obstruct one who engages in them. This is in Alagatthupama Sutta. The simile of the snake, the Buddha goes on to mention 13 similes. Second in this sutta and the others in Majjhima Nikaya 54, where the gist of it is that if you handle something the wrong way, you will get burned. But if you handle it the right way, you won't get burnt. For in many of these discourses, he has stated how obstructive things are obstructions and how they are able to obstruct one who engages in them. The Buddha set up better circumstances for a deeper investigation in practice. He took personal time alone and became more particular about his surroundings. He took special time for deeper observation work. Friends, he sat without a clock or bell in the forest. He sat for all the time there is. That was his directive to his brain. I will sit for all the time there is. You may become surprised what can happen once you decide to try this. Later on, during modern times, this became the parameters for the beginning of holding retreats for periods of time for lay people to come away from their household mindsets, leaving the busy world and taking time off to learn how to do some of this meditation.